So tonight's presentation is on botanical priority protection areas of the East Bay, and our guest speaker is Heath Bartosh. Heath has been an active CNPS member for many years. He has sat on the East Bay Chapter Board of Directors for 5 years and is now with the CNPS Rare Plant Program Committee. He's a professional botanist for over 10 years and is the founding principal of Nomad Ecology and also works on the Save Mount Diablo's Land Committee. He holds a BS in Natural Resources Planning from Humboldt State University. So everyone welcome Heath Bartosh.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to see some friendly faces here on a Friday night. Glad you chose to come hear my talk instead of go out party somewhere. This is a college town, I think, right?
I thought we were partying.
That's a good point. This is how I like to party. So originally I was supposed to speak to you about this topic with Lek Nomovich, but he's our former conservation analyst, paid staff person for the East Bay chapter that we raise money for internally, and he's since moved on, and he's actually vacationing in Maine right now, so he couldn't be with us tonight. So I'm going to try and do my best here. So I'm here to talk about this guidebook, and who's familiar with the guidebook? Anybody seen it?
I've seen it.
It's been in short supply. But it's a guidebook of botanical priority protection areas for the East Bay. And so tonight I'm going to go through a little bit about how this all came to be, some of the nuts and bolts about the book, and then take you through some of the steps on how we collected the data and presented it in the book. But it was a 4-year process. Took numerous individuals to put it together. There was 3 main authors, myself, Lek, and Laura Baker, who's the conservation chair for the East Bay chapter. And then we also had guest authors contribute in writing to sort of flesh out some of these areas and give them life in words. And then, well, we published it last year, and so it published, I think it was in October, and so the publication isn't even quite a year old. But it was, we had some generous grant funding from the Rose and the Tides Foundation, and so we were able to produce about 75 copies the first run. And so we gave those to targeted individuals in the East Bay, land managers and decision makers there. But so let's go ahead and look at some of this stuff here. I'll start off with talking about the layout. Yeah, one back. Layout of the guidebook. So the guidebook is set up to where we're talking about 15 of these priority protection areas, and on the left-hand side of the book we have a map such as this. So it shows in acres, or the acreage of the area, and there's a data table that has some information there. Let me go ahead and turn to the page so I can read some of what is on there. And I know typically you're not supposed to read during these presentations, but I think go ahead and get it passed since some of the text is so small. But it has the size of the area, so this one's 15,000 acres roughly, and it has some information about the watershed and some of the significant substrates, and then the botanical attributes, whether there's rare plants in there, how many occurrences there are, and then the types of rare plants, whether they're listed by CNPS or by the state or federal governments. Then the next thing is on the text side. It was broken up, go ahead and change the next slide, broken up into a few different compartments here. And so just point out here that this top portion here is where we invited guest authors. So there was 15 guest authors, and in this case we had Bruce Baldwin, who's the curator of the Jepson Herbarium, write and flesh out some of the high points of the protection area. And the point there was to sort of elicit some feelings and talk a little bit technically about the area, but also to attract lay people and why it's important. Then we have some pictures here of plants that you might find in the area, rare plants, and they're listed here. And then botanical hotspots and maybe a few collection anecdotes from the area, and then some threats, opportunities, and constraints. And so if you would allow me here, I'll read a little bit of it. I'd like to read Bruce's contribution here. He says, "For me, the look and smell of the East Dublin Tassajara area resonates as a connection with my childhood in Arroyo Grande and a lifetime of California experiences. It is as close to pristine as California as you can get in our East Bay grasslands. Based on studies conducted at the Jepson Herbarium, I can attest that this area is home to some plants, such as Congdon's tar plant, which is undergoing initial evolutionary divergence in our area, and some that represent much more ancient diversity than previously thought, such as the San Joaquin spear scale. This diversity probably owes much to the dynamic geology, geological history, and steep ecological gradients provided in this BPPA. BPPA is the acronym we use for these areas. With continued urbanization, there is potential to lose diversity within these refugia prior to its discovery or full characterization. The alkaline habitat that supports species such as Congdon's tar plant and San Joaquin spear scale is botanically rich and rare within the Bay Area. However, habitats such as this is typically considered wasteland. So I don't know if any people have ever been to some of these alkaline places. At first they can be a little bit hard to love because they look so bleak. That's what Bruce is trying to touch on there. So the plants that occupy this alkaline habitat may not have horticultural appeal either, although they have enormous value to biologists, and their importance to understanding California's natural history is great. Once the observer realizes the value of this underappreciated biological diversity, its unique beauty can shine through. And I think that's a really important point because I too am an alkaline lover. Even in the fall season, when the place superficially looks spent and desiccated, there's a lot going on, not only with the plants, but also with the insects, whose associations and interactions are poorly understood. Visiting here in the morning and evening hours will allow you to beat the heat and observe more wildlife activity. I especially enjoy the feeling of this country at the time of day when the lighting is dim and the shadows are long." So for somebody who's pretty hardcore academic, it's nice to see him reach out and sort of draw out some feelings of a place that he's done some studies and a place that's particularly hard to love, like this alkaline habitat. So then, like I was saying, you can't see the text there, but the picture on the left shows you the northern clay pan vernal pool in the area. And then picture number 2 with the yellow comp there is Congdon's tar plant, which the map on the previous page, this is really Congdon's tar plant heartland. So a lot of the occurrences occur in the East Dublin Tassajara area. And then the third thing pictured there is white-headed Navarretia leucocephala, which is a locally rare plant in East Bay. It's not statewide rare, but something that we only have a few occurrences of. And through the work of Diane Lake, have tracked locally rare plants in the East Bay for over 10 years. Number 4 is saline clover, Trifolium depauperatum hydrophyllum, which sadly the occurrence there in East Dublin area is now underneath some concrete. Yeah, East Dublin, I don't know if you're familiar with, is a place that's really fast growing and very pro-growth. And sadly, a lot of the places that were vernal pools, and this is the valley of Arroyo Las Positas, or Creek of the Little Pools. A lot of those little pools are all but gone. And then there's yellow owl's clover here, which, you know, you go to other places, it's not very, very uncommon, but in the East Bay, it's considered locally rare. So, then some of the other things we talk about here is threats, opportunities, and constraints. One of the major opportunities I'll highlight is that our chapter took part in the East Alameda Conservation Strategy, which has been going on for the past couple of years. And through this effort here with the Guidebook and the work that we did to delineate these 15 priority protection areas, we were able to get that into the conservation strategy, and I'll touch on that a little later. Let's see. Well, so what really was the purpose that we tried to get after with this book? And I'd like to say we tried to educate, direct, and improve. And so by education, I mean that we tried to educate decision makers like East Bay Parks, cities, the county, and Board of Supervisors, and those people who make important decisions about land use, and also their constituents on the botanical resources and conservation issues of East Bay. And so we also tried to direct conservation acquisitions and advocacy efforts. And so I'll talk about later how we've been doing that through advocacy on some of these protection areas that has happened within the past year and is actually ongoing right now. And then also improve awareness of native plants and other natural resources in terms of management efforts. So East Bay Regional Park District, they have a lot of land. Sometimes some of the land management issues or botanical issues kind of get put aside, and so it's bringing those to the forefront and making sure that they're aware of things that we care about. And then generally just affect change, because plants, I don't know if you guys know this, but they kind of get short shrift.
No.
Really? Yeah, they're not as high profile as animals. So that was part of the other thing, is to put something tangible into people's hands and say, hey, look at this is great. We've got a lot of great botanical resources in the East Bay. Here's some pictures, check it out, a little bit of text, and try and sort of whet their appetite a little bit. Maybe you can become members. Go ahead and hit the next slide there. So, one back. There we go. How it started. So how did this all start? It was back in 2006 that, I'm not sure if you guys remember the beginnings of the Upland Habitat Goals Project. Some people may be familiar with it. It was started by the Bay Area Open Space Council, and what they did was take a look at the 9-county Bay Area and say, what are conservation targets? So species-wise, what are we looking to protect and preserve? And based on that, what sort of habitats are we looking to preserve? And so they looked at this 9-county Bay Area, and through consultation with scientists, looked at all these specific areas and tried to drill down to see what lands, parcels that they were looking at as important for these target species. And so they contacted us in 2006 and said, hey, we're putting this Bay Area Upland Habitat Goals project together. What lands do you care about in the East Bay? And so, I didn't mention before that East Bay, we're talking about Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And they said, do you think you can get back to us tomorrow? So it was a number of people, Sue Bainbridge, Diane Lake, John Gamechrist there, a number of other people, started this email flurry, and initially we came together with this list of 15. And so that's great, These are the areas that mean a lot to us. And so we had sort of a framework to start with. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So we identified these areas, and there's 15, and you can see a couple of them here. They're spread out throughout the East Bay. Primarily, they're on the east side of the counties, eastern Alameda and Contra Costa counties, with a few in some of the remaining habitats along the Bay shore. So I'll just show you the overview map here. Is that you can see what I'm saying here in the green are the priority protection areas, and as you could guess, there's a lot of population. A lot of our population lives on the Bay side, as it is here in Santa Clara County, and so we do have a few things that are still up for grabs. There's things that we care about, so like Warm Springs down by Don Edwards, and foothills of South Oakland, where we're actually doing some advocacy work right now. Point Malati, Point Richmond is where we have done some advocacy work with some success in the past year. And then we've got these really large blocks of land where we're looking at hopefully doing a lot of conservation, or at least directing conservation acquisitions. So Cedar Mountain, where there's a lot of serpentine, Corral Hollow, where there's a lot of that desert influence that creeps up the east side of the South Coast Range, comes up, Altamont Pass, Byron, the Delta. Go into a little more detail about these things in a bit.
What are the two areas east of Altamont?
East of Altamont? So here's Altamont.
Uh-huh.
Are you talking about west? Yeah. So this is Springtown.
Okay.
You guys are familiar with that, where Springtown is a place where I kind of like to call it our own little Carrizo Plain, because it's an alkali sink, and it has a lot of similar species, at least in genera. And then this is the East Dublin Tassajara. So, and then here's Mount Diablo. So there's some areas around Mount Diablo. Four Valleys, which is Madonna's Hills here, where we're talking about, and then Concord Naval Weapons Station, where it was it was owned by the Navy and has since been given to the City of Concord, and through they call it a BREC process, but a process where the land is given to a municipality, and then the municipality decides what to do with it. And so we've been going through that planning process, and about 2,000 acres of that area is actually going to be preserved as open space through the East Bay Park District. So let's see some photos of these areas.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So if the majority of the open space is outside of the reach of the general population, based on what you said earlier, how do they care? How do you tie them into the...
It's a very good question, because our chapter actually is very... most of our members are on the bay side, and so that can be a challenge. One thing we can do very easily is to rally our chapter members along the bay shore in these areas where I was talking about, the foothills of South Oakland, Point Richmond. But it is a challenge because very few of our members actually live in these areas. So we have to rely on our conservation allies to get some of that work done too. So we partner with Greenbelt Alliance, Save Mount Diablo, Tri-Valley Conservancy out of Livermore. And so a lot of that work gets done in partnerships, and so we work together. Actually, right now, there's a very large solar project being proposed for eastern Alameda County, which falls within our Altamont priority protection area. It's about 2,000 acres. It's being touted as the largest solar array in the nation, is what I've seen. And so that's something we're working with a Sierra Club, actually, and Greenbelt, and Ohlone Audubon, actually, too. So try and get a lot of work done that way also, where we don't have people power.
Next.
Yeah, next. So this is Byron talking about salty places, where they don't get good until the late season. You can see some of these tar weeds and Atroplex species.
Oh, that's right.
So this is looking out in the Byron area where there's still lots of water late in the season, and around the edges, these salty places is where a lot of the good stuff grows.
Is that west?
That's west, yeah. Concord Naval Weapons Station, so this is the place, these are the areas, this is some of that 2,000 acres I was talking about that's going to end up being preserved as a part of that planning process with the City of Concord and Mount Diablo in the back room there. This is out in the Delta area, where some of the major substrates that we care about, and a lot of which have been built on, is sands. So there's a lot of aeolian sands that have been piling up due to the wind action that comes through the delta, beats up the rock on the north side of the delta, and then carries the wind, which falls out in the east part of our county. In those areas, the sand is piled up over time and has built some really interesting plant communities, but a lot of those plant communities are no longer in existence because of the rapid development that has been going on and was accelerated during the last building boom. So places like Brentwood and Oakley, these are areas that the sand deposits provided perfect habitat for species that during warmer trends 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, marched up from the Mojave, the inside of or the west side of the San Joaquin Valley, and landed there as their northernmost expression, and then began to speciate. And so one of these things here is we've got Antioch Dunes Evening Primrose, which is a state and federally listed plant. There's very, very little sandy habitat left. It's on the Antioch Dunes Wildlife Refuge, and then there's a couple other places that we went to visit this year. Just happens to be on a railroad right away, one of the few healthy populations that are left. And I think my little boy is saying, my little son is saying, "Can you believe this is the only place?" Go ahead. East Dublin Tassajara. So this is actually you can't really tell, but this is one of the largest Congans tar plant populations growing right here in the lower valley bottom. It likes heavy clay soils, really alkaline, and there's also great bunch grasses, and this area is actually really good for wildlife also, burrowing owls, red-legged frog, and tiger salamanders.
So which way is north?
We're looking southeast.
Okay.
Go ahead. Four Valleys. So this is, before I mentioned the Los Medanos Hills, these are the hills that are the Los Medanos Hills. They stretch up towards Concord Naval Weapons Station, so this is looking northwest. There's Mount Diablo, and I don't know if any of you have been to Black Diamond Mines Regional Park, but it's there. And so these areas, this is Sand Creek here, still some really good character, a lot of sinuosity on the creek, oxbows. There's alkali ground there, and then there's also good wildflower displays in that area in the springtime.
It looks like development on the right. Because
It is. Actually, if you want to turn back to that picture, this has also been an advocacy effort that has been ongoing for a decade, in that this whole area has a specific plan for it. And so the city of, I believe it's the city of Antioch, which is here, they have had their eyes on this land for a long time, but we've been able to actually draw an urban limit line here. I think it actually comes halfway through. So at this point, we're able to stave off development, and hopefully we'll be able to in the future. Yeah.
Do you know who, is that all owned by one owner, or is it
That's-
ownership?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, a lot of the land out here in eastern Contra Costa County and Alameda County are large landowners still. Those specific parcels, I'm not sure, but just one ridge over is another valley, and it's known as Roddy Ranch. And a gentleman there has owned the land for a long time, and he owns a couple sections of it, so we're talking 640-acre blocks.
Are you making any efforts for conservation easements on this stuff?
There is not so much conservation easement. We like to do a fee title over there. We just go and buy it right out.
Yeah.
The actual price for property right now out there, large acreages at least, is pretty good. So by we, I don't mean CNPS, but our conservation allies are out there purchasing a lot of land right now. So it's a good time. And actually,
Like what does it run an acre, 4,000 or more?
less, yeah. About 3,000 acres is the average price per acre out there. And Contra Costa Water District, who is in the process, they actually have gone through their planning process and are getting close to raising the Los Vaqueros Dam. They got dinged by the Fish and Wildlife and CDFG because they're going to be flooding some of their conservation easements that they had put in place during the original dam construction. The agencies didn't like that, so they ended up hitting them with I believe it was 10-to-1 mitigation ratio. So they've been out there buying up land in acreage by the thousands. So aside from Contra Costa Water District and the Habitat Conservation Plan that's in place in Contra Costa County right now, there's a big conservation land grab going on. Go ahead, next. So let's see, this is Marsh Creek. City of Mount Diablo refers to this area as the donut hole because there's lots of parcels that have been protected by, we're here on close to Mount Diablo, and then you've got Morgan Territory Regional Preserve, then Round Valley, and then there's another 1,000 acres or so preserve of land in Cow Ranch, and then you continue swing around north and you hit towards Black Diamond Mines, and that's now being connected up with Mount Diablo. And so you've got this ring of protected lands, and so this here, which is Marsh Creek running down, is known as the donut hole. And so they're slowly starting to try and acquire lands in there. But there's great habitats, serpentine habitats, blue oak woodlands and chaparral, and this is some of the good habitat that we're still hoping to find. Mount Diablo buckwheat, which was rediscovered in 2005 by Michael Park on the mountain. And every year we've organized Find Buckwheat Day, and in hopes to find other natural populations, but haven't found any yet. There's been one reintroduction that has been successful, and we're hoping to do some more.
So are we looking east?
Yes, east. Go for it.
That was about 10 o'clock in the morning when that picture.
Yes, yeah, it was. So here's north of Mount Diablo. So now we're on the north side of Mount Diablo looking south. This is North Peak, and there's Mount Diablo proper. And at the time that we had delineated these protection areas, this parcel here, Irish Canyon, was unprotected. And since publication, it's actually been purchased and given to East Bay Regional Park District. So it's a land bank status right now, which means it's not publicly accessible, but will be soon.
How far away is Clayton?
If you go back, Clayton's just right over here, so pretty close, easy walking distance. And here's, this is definitely one of my favorite spots in the East Bay, Springtown, which just about any time of year you can go there and find something really cool, because you've got vernal pools in the spring with down Indias blooming, and then Lastenia here, Lastenia glabrata, and then later in the season you get to see iodine bush, Ellen Rolfia, and this is what I'm talking about being sort of similar to the Carrizo Plain in the East Bay. We just got a little bit of our own Carrizo Plain. It's a sink, the water flows out to nowhere, it just drops into the ground and vanishes into the clay and the gravels. But very important area, some very important plants there. It's got 80% of the genetic diversity of Cordylanthus palmatus. So Cordylanthus palmatus occurs here in Springtown, and then some scattered populations down in the southern San Joaquin Valley. But this is really the heartland of its existence. So, that's great. These areas are really important. And we know that, and I'm sure you guys understand, and lots of other CNPSers, but why does it matter? How can we make it matter to other people? And so that was really the focus of the guidebook, is that, we've got all these great spots, and how can we provide that information to others in a way that's palatable? So what did we do here? Well, first we figured out, what do we know? That, we can define these areas, and in order to define them, watershed boundaries, watersheds make good boundaries because, you're not identifying specific parcels, so you have less of a chance to tick somebody off. And it's a little more objective. Then we've got, we can analyze a lot of information about the unique abiotic features, such as soils and geology, because like you guys here in Santa Clara Valley chapter, you've got some serpentine, you know exactly what kind of soil types your serpentine is made of, and then the bedrock. In the East Bay, we've got sands, like I was talking about in the Delta region. We've got alkaline soils, and then we've also got bedrock geology and serpentine soils. So that information is available. Then we've got other information like sensitive natural communities, lists, federal and state species lists, and our locally rare plants database that's been maintained. And then from an advocacy standpoint, conservation standpoint, we know about where habitat alteration is taking place, where the big pushes are for development, and then some of the existing conservation plans, who's been developing those, what state they're in, and so where these data gaps are, and where protection needs to be focused.
Next.
Yeah, go for it. So then we went about data gathering. So based on what we know, we're talking about defining the boundaries. So we went out and pulled out all the watershed boundaries. And then looking at the abiotic features we're talking about. So here's a watershed boundary for Springtown. And so then we said, okay, we've got Springtown identified, and we've got a watershed boundary, so what can we look through that into that looking glass and see? And so by doing that, we've got here, you can see this blue polygon here is alkaline soils. And then actually this red polygon here is alkaline soils that have been developed on. And the state of California, they maintain this database called Farmland Mapping and Monitoring Program. And with that database, they look at agriculture and identify what's prime farmland, unique farmland, farmland of statewide importance, but then they also keep in that database, delineate where development has happened, and they do this every 2 years. And so based on that every 2-year look, we can see what's been developed. And so using GIS, we can see, well, those are no longer viable. Up here in the Delta region, this purple crosshatching here, those are sands that have been developed on. Those are no longer viable. But we do have some stuff here, the yellow, the sands that do still need protection. And then, so we're talking about also our botanical regions, and within each of those regions, the East Bay, which the East Bay is divided into 40, we have a database that tells us what plants grow within each one of those regions. And so cross-referencing these botanical regions with our priority protection area boundaries, we can get a sense of how many occurrences of specific locally rare plants or statewide rare plants are in that botanical area. So then we put the data together and analyze the results here. So the purple that I was talking about before is that here's all the sands that were, the purple and this orange are all the sands that were out here in the Delta region. And so purple means that they've been developed on. Oakley's been doing a lot of development in the past few years, and they've actually sunk a lot of the sands out there. Same thing goes for Brentwood or Discovery Bay here, and then this other part of Oakley, where the yellow is alkaline soils that are still in existence, and then the stuff in red is what's been developed.
Is the top part of this north?
Well, let's see. That's north there. I had to tilt
So-
the map a little bit to make sure all that fit on
Yes.
one. Yeah. And then the other thing is that most of the areas, we tried not to include East Bay parks, which are shown in green here. But in other cases we did. It just depended on how many resources were in those specific park units and whether or not there's some pressure, management pressure or management decisions that would maybe put some of those resources at risk. So I just wanted to summarize some of this because to me it ended up turning out to be very interesting. So here's the East Bay results. And so when we're looking at geology and soils of serpentine, total of about 9,000 acres. Only 7 of them were developed, and 93% are still in existence. And that's because up in the Cedar Mountain area, I don't know if you guys are familiar with up Mines Road, the northern part of the Mount Hamilton range there's large blocks of serpentine that are technically in our East Bay chapter that are still in good shape and great to botanists. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. But the 7% that's been developed on, it occurs out in the Oakland Hills, Richmond, where there was a lot of serpentine. And you can still see some of that over in Redwood Regional Park and Serpentine Prairie, which both are East Bay Regional Park District units. And Serpentine Prairie actually still has one of the very few populations of Presidio clarkia, which is a serpentine endemic. Then we're looking at alkaline soils of the 2 counties, and actually 24% have been developed on. And so we're talking about the areas out by the Delta. Springtown in particular has been hit really hard because there was a huge housing development built in Springtown, just on the north side of 580 in Livermore. And then we look at the sandy soils, and really Contra Costa County is the only one with sandy soils. Alameda doesn't really have any. And 35% of the sandy soils in Contra Costa County have been developed on. We saw that in the purple on that Delta map. And so, unfortunately, it's sort of a real uphill battle with the sandy soils because the habitat's been so fragmented, and because sandy areas are so prone to weeds, it's difficult to be able to piece together some large preserves. And also, just the nature of those sandy areas, there were sort of small pockets in these larger tidal systems and delta systems where the water came out of and met at the San Joaquin-Sacramento River Delta. So then we put all this information together and then decided to package it together, put it in this book, because at the first step actually was the maps were put together and Lex started shopping these things around. And then we decided, well, let's put it together in a nice package with some text and some pictures to be able to tell the story. And so the maps and the guidebook have so far been provided to Bay Area Open Space Council, of course, which was the Upland Habitat Goals Project, which I talked about. And then the Green Vision Group, which was sort of an offshoot of Greenbelt Alliance, and they were talking about green visioning for how they would like, how the stakeholders would like the East Bay to look. Green belts, open space preserves that may be just somebody's idea, and how to make that happen. Then East Bay Regional Park District, the priority protection areas were included into their master plan process. when they did the revision a couple years ago, and so their map showed our East Bay chapter priority protection areas, which was great. They're very, very cooperative with us and our desires for the most part. Then East Alameda County Conservation Strategy, which I talked about, that encompasses the area from Pleasanton Ridge, which is about just west of Dublin, all the way out to the East Alameda County border with San Joaquin County. And so this is a very large area. It's a conservation strategy that's basically a way to streamline mitigation efforts for projects. So if you have a specific project and you're impacting certain species, it'll tell you how you need to mitigate and at what ratios. And so through that effort and Lex diligence, we were able to get the areas that fall within that part of Alameda County into their plan. We actually went and talked to the steering committee there, and they were accepting and included our areas and a description of how they fit into their plan after talking with them. And then we also provided them with some core habitat areas. I'll go into that in a few slides down the road. But then just local municipalities, like City of Livermore, which we've really been trying to get on board with doing some maintenance and fencing of the Springtown area, because it actually turns out it's a great place to ride your dirt bike. Sort of a bummer. But then also City of Richmond, and we're working with the City of Oakland right now. So in talking about the East Alameda Conservation Strategy, these are the areas that we ended up giving them. So their strategy goes all the way out here, there's Dublin, Pleasanton, sort of skirts down here to Snow, excluding some of the San Francisco watershed lands, all the way up here across the San Joaquin border to Contra Costa County. And so we gave them some of our 15 areas, and actually included some other ones just because the area was so large. And then within that, we were able to identify the core habitat area by parcel in some cases. And so we identified parcels that we knew of that had some really great alkaline habitat in both East Dublin and Springtown priority protection areas, and then some good uplands and alkaline habitats in the Byron and Altamont Pass, and then here in Corral Hollow, some other great areas too. So they actually took that information as digital shape files and worked it into their plan also.
Who is they again?
This is the East Alameda Conservation Strategy.
The Board of Supervisors?
Well, it's actually it's a process that's interestingly enough being driven by Zone 7, which is a water district out there, in part with Alameda County, and it's Jones and Stokes or ICF who's writing the plan for them. So they want to see, they have desires to make permitting processes in these areas, which are really primarily focused on red-legged frog and California tiger salamander, to make mitigation happen a lot smoother and sort of grease the wheels for project proponents out there.
So it's unincorporated land that the county has the land use authority over.
Mm-hmm. And I think that there could be some buy-in for local municipalities who are interested in having their project proponents go through this process too. And unfortunately, Lex not here. He was a part of the public advisory committee there, and he could talk to you in more detail about that. But essentially it was a county and special district-driven process. So then we're talking about advocacy and defending. So we had a real coup last year when I don't know if you heard about this talk of a casino out in Point Malani. And so this map was sent early on to City Council and the Mayor of Richmond, and we told them that, well, this falls within one of our priority protection areas, and we're interested in seeing it preserved. And so through our advocacy efforts and all of the volunteers, wonderful volunteers we had go to City Council meetings, and also some of the media that we got in opposition to the casino, the city council ended up voting down the project. And so that was a real win for us. And since then, the city of Richmond, one of their engineers had contacted us because they're doing a restoration project, and they wanted to know a little bit more about what the plants are like out there and some of the more interesting areas. And so they've been asking for copies of the guidebook too. So it's good to know that it's going beyond just plant enthusiasts to actual engineers at a municipality. Then we're talking about something that's going on right now, and this is one of the public areas that was included here. This is Nolan Park. We're looking at City of Oakland here, Anthony Chabot Regional Park, and the Oakland Zoo is right down here. And so the Oakland Zoo is talking about expanding, and Nolan Park has some of probably has the best remaining grasslands that are on the foothills that close to Oakland, native grasslands. And we're talking about California oak grass, purple needle grass, and some other locally rare things, and then Leptosiphon acicularis, which is list 4, I believe, and that's really the only place it grows in the East Bay. So we're digging in our heels there, and part of the defense is based on because it's a priority protection area. And so keep abreast, because I think that news is going to be heating up, and which is going to be a very difficult fight because public opinion is swinging in favor of the zoo because a lot of people are on board with the zoo and what they have planned, but unfortunately the zoo is not recognizing the value and the difficulty in trying to mitigate some of these grasslands here that they have on Nolan Park.
Is the grassland, let's see, California grasslands, which I belong to, I had heard before that they had sent a listing of the grasses when the casino was.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the CNGA was involved with us, and as they are in the Nolan Park and Oakland Zoo proposal that's going on right now. So, and actually there was a small group that formed called Friends of Nolan Park. So people are trying to raise the awareness of these important grasslands that are literally a step away from a large metropolitan area. So the next steps really is we're going to continue to circulate the guidebook as much as we can with the limited funds that we have for it. Like I said, we had gotten a generous grant from the Rose and the Tides Foundation to produce some books, and they're a little bit expensive to reproduce, so it's a little tough to get funding, but we're exploring the idea of putting them on the web for download. So keep posted on that. And then also, Tara Hansen, the executive director, and Sandy McCoy have been trying to float a proposal we worked on with them to do these things statewide. And so going around chapter by chapter and try and collect information in a geodatabase, a spatial database, on what important botanical resources there are and important substrates there are around the state to sort of get at least a first initial draft of priority protection areas on a statewide basis. But we're still waiting for somebody to latch on to that. We haven't gotten anybody to do so yet. So with that, open it up to any questions you have.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about the expense of it. You have one there. Could you show us?
I do, actually.
So what is it about that makes it so expensive?
Well, the cardstock, really, and the color reproduction is what makes it expensive. It cost us about $36 a copy to make, and it's large format, so it's not just it's not just 11 by 17, but you get in there with a little bit of glossy paper and some nice photos, and so it's a little more expensive.
What's standing in the way of putting it out on the web so that, they say maybe city people can email a copy to other city people so that everybody in Concord could have a copy of this if they wanted?
Well, I have to say our own shortcomings.
So what are they, are you thinking that it's going to be saleable?
Well, we tried to do that because we wanted to at least try and generate some revenue for the chapter.
Mhm.
But it was difficult in trying to set a price for that. And so I think sort of waiting for a year's time to let the dust settle and get these other things off our to-do list. Because right now, actually the chapter's really involved with Nolan Park at the moment and this East County solar thing. And so, you know, as volunteers, you do as much as you can when you can. When the dust clears, you pick up something else. So, October will be a year since we first put it out there, and it might be a good time to put it on the web at that point. So, I think we've probably got copies out to at least a majority of the individuals or organizations or local governments that we want to at this point. And so, you know, having it downloadable on the web would be a great thing, and we'd like to see it, you know, widely used and even generated by other chapters too.
Yeah, I would like to see a copy so that maybe, you know, I'm sure there's a bunch of people here who would like to see a copy so that we could give it away, but so we could emulate it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I can leave you with this copy here, but I don't know, don't all bum rush me at once. So maybe I'll leave it with Ingrid.
I think Dr. Mayoff has a copy as well, because we have discussed this at our chapter live board. We have our chapter conservation committee where we talked about how would we do this for our chapter, and what would be the resource commitment that it would take, what kind of leadership would it take. So it's an undertaking, and you need this set, and there's several years, and you have to kind of start the ball rolling with the idea that it's going to be a long-term commitment.
Yeah, like I say, it was 4 years. It wasn't a full-time effort by any means, but important people to have involved would be somebody with geographic information system skills, local experts, somebody who can run some sort of publisher-like software. So Lek was the one that did the layouts, and I did the maps, and you know, just slowly pieced it all together with Laura's help and editing skills. So,
About how many volunteers kind of roughly, you know, put time into this?
well, let's see. So we had we initially had thought one guest author per protection area, and it ended up being some paired together. So there was probably about 18 guest authors, and then all of the photos were donated, and so there was a number of people who get photo credits in the book, and I would say probably add another 10 people to that, and then Laura Leck and myself, and you know, a few other people here and there, so about 30 people in all, from guest authors and photo contributors and editors and things. So, yeah, it's a group effort. Any questions?
Yeah, who in the effort went out to try to the foundations or the people that did provide some range for the initial printing of the 100 copies or whatever?
That was actually Sandy McCoy who ended up getting us that funding, and that was pretty early on. That was at the time where only the maps had been produced, and Lek was shopping those around. And initially, it was sort of an idea that we would be able to try and get some more funding for his position, because it's you know, totally based on donations.
What Sandy was with the chapter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was, I don't know, maybe 2007 or so that we had applied for that grant funding. So, and
I would think that people, you know, like the water district, the regional transportation, MTA, and perhaps a solar PG&E might be wonderful. People that would throw in $20,000 a piece for the purpose of publishing the magazine and getting it around to even more decision makers in the municipalities and
Yeah.
as well as the public. It seems like there ought to be, there might be something more, because this woman over here asked, how do you buy the public into this stuff? How do you make them invest into it? And that's always a challenge for our plant societies and our bird clubs, is how do we
Well,
get their buy-in?
I'm going to say something because, I'm here, but, I don't think that the city actually promotes this group. So, as for instance, if I have when you rebuild in Palo Alto, there's a requirement to get a green rater. You have to hire a green rater. And the green rater tells you how many points in every category you need. Is anybody familiar with this?
What's a green?
You all don't know about it.
We're not Palo Alto residents.
Yeah, we're not right.
You're not Palo Alto.
So the term
Not all.
is green?
Rating.
I don't think it's specific to Palo Alto. I think this is generally.
Are you talking about the LEED certification?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, is everybody familiar with LEED? It's right now. It just relates to, I think, like add-ons, or if you're going to do a single-family dwelling, you get graded on how energy efficient your home is, what sort of building materials you're using. Are you using drought-tolerant plants and things? And so I think somehow that rating gets given to the city, and I don't know, maybe you get a discount on your
There's no
planting
such thing
permits or
as a
something.
discount on it.
She might be new, but she's wise.
Well, I also graduated from forestry school, so back east. But in any event, but what I'm trying to say is that it is an adopted method for promoting conservation, and but what the lacking, the piece that's lacking, is that no one says to me, how do you do it? I had to think, what would I do to accomplish my goal? And if someone had said, you should get in touch with the California Native Plant Society in your area, then you would probably generate a lot more interest from people like me who need assistance in moving this forward, rather than hiring a landscape designer, which is more money, no discount.
Sounds like we got an outreach volunteer, guys.
But I'm not East Bay.
Oh no, well, this is a Santa Clara Valley chapter event.
So currently what's happening right now is that in Santa Clara County we have a thing called, or we used to have a thing called the Habitat Conservation Plan. And recently it's pretty much taken it in the shorts. And I can see where, I don't know how our chapter would do it, but I could see where we could potentially step up and fill a space that is very neglected at this point in time. I don't know what's going to happen to that plan. And
Is it a funding issue? Or?
It's funding. And it's been 10 years in the making.
It's primarily at this point a local economics issue, and in large part due to the current economic environment everywhere. What you have are some of the major players just, push comes to shove. There's a lot of work goes into preparing the plan proposal, and everybody says, oh yeah, I'm all for that, that's great, go ahead and come up with your plan. But when it actually comes to the point of getting it ratified, then all the different municipalities have to step up and say, yes, we really want to do this. Well, what you have is a financial impact on a local scale. And you have any given community saying, well, am I putting myself at a disadvantage compared to a neighboring community outside the bounds of the HCP area? Because within the HCP area, there are going to be funds that are drawn in association with the development. So what you have are big players, including San Jose, looking at this at the council level, saying, do we really want to do this or not? We've had some of the intermediate, middle-level players have backed out. You have at the San Jose level, not a complete back out yet, but they've sort of put the brakes on. And so what we're looking at, and this is what Vicky's talking about, is how do we provide some advocacy to say, let's look at the long-term picture here, the big picture, and recognize that what we have right now is a short-term downturn in the economy, but ultimately everybody is going to be viewing things this way. If you get on board now, you're going to be ahead of the curve, not putting yourself behind the curve.
Well, see,
it's a tough sell to make.
It's an interesting thing because we were fortunate in Contra Costa County to get our HCP implemented right around the time that the housing market took the big turn. And it was fortunate in that it got implemented at that time, and then all this federal money came. And they have a stay-ahead provision in the HCP where you have to go out and preserve land and get it taken care of. And so that hasn't really hurt the county or the HCP, even though that there hasn't been any development fees for projects with the poor housing market. So, but how that ties into helping just local people figure out how to green up and find the resources that they need to make informed decisions is another story.
Yeah, we had somebody come to our wildflower show in April, same sort of thing. City of Saratoga says, I have to plant natives. That was all new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's not really any sort of a resource that helps people with these things other than the paid consultants, whether it's landscape designers or what have you.
Yeah, and I've spoken to people that have done that, and they're not happy with the outcomes. They don't know how to manage the landscaping after the person leaves.
With our group, there's a group called Gardening with Natives, and they have a website. Yeah, they have a website, and currently they certainly are ramping up in terms of educating the public.
Well, they need to, because, I think that there's a lot of development going on. There are still people with big money in this area. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And everywhere you turn, you see these projects. And I know that there are people like me everywhere. And this just started last year. I believe you may know more about, I think it's like a year old or less than a year old.
The leads?
Yeah, because this was my second time in, and I think it was July of 2010 when they kicked in the lead requirement for major remodeling and rebuilding in Palo Alto. But I know that it's happening in other places because I Googled it and I've seen, when you do it, you see it's not just California, it's a national movement, and I think there's the potential for education there that.
Yeah, there's some disconnect happening.
Yeah, I agree. That's it.
So to put in a plug, so this group has a lot of speakers, and most of them are speaking on native plants in the garden. And on the CNPS-SCV website, our local website, we've got links to, I think, about 12 videos now. And if you're interested, or if anybody's interested, feel free to get on the web, and you can look at a whole bunch of these presentations. A lot of them are talking about natives in the garden, how to maintain them. We had a talk by Bernie Coates about how to maintain oak trees. We've had a bunch of very interesting talks.
I appreciate what you're saying, and you can talk to me about it, but I'm very techie, so I can find information. That's what I do, but there are people, so many people like me out there, and we're not reaching those people because the very cities that are promoting these projects, the city that is helping you sponsor this event is not educating the public on where they can go to get help other than paying someone to
And
do
we're
it.
dancing as fast as we can.
It's
We
a
are
valid
all
point.
volunteer.
It's something that we discuss certainly within our chapter at a leadership level on a regular basis in the strategy. Because we do some boots on the ground work, but CNPS is primarily an advocacy and outreach organization. We're out there trying to educate as much as we can, but we're resource limited in that we're not the size of an Audubon, we're not the size of a Sierra Club. And it's great that, in some ways it's great that there are municipalities that are creating these requirements, because it means that the groundswell is starting, but it also presents challenges to us. It's an opportunity for us to do more outreach, but it's a challenge for us to find ways to effectively do that and grow our organization and reach all those people. So your point is well taken, and we're working at it. In some ways, what Heath is talking about here, it's a great way to tie some of these groundswells together. We raise awareness about conservation in the wild, and tie that into what people do in their yards, and get support for both going in both directions.
Yeah,
we have to find a way to plug that together.
Yeah, our chapter, a lot of these areas are well known to the seed collectors at our nursery, the chapter's nursery. So they'll go out and collect and propagate and sell all these things from these protection areas that probably aren't rare, but are good for gardening. Attractive also.
And certainly I think that our chapter is really good. It's really dynamic, really energetic. But many times I go to you guys' meetings or hear speakers from your chapter, and I'm just sitting there agreeing with envy.
Yeah.
You guys are just great.
Well,
like, dang.
I know, I need to go to more chapter meetings. Tough to get over to Berkeley there from Central County.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you have any ideas. The book itself is wonderful, and it's a great sparker of ideas. And obviously we're talking about, gee, what can we do in our chapter along these lines, or what can we use as a model here, but tailor it to our specific needs. And certainly the effort that you talk about at the state level of trying to sprinkle this model around the state is wonderful. And I'm wondering, towards that end, if you look back at what you did to produce your effort here, are there things beyond just it being a model? Are there particular example tools, example databases, things like that you can see sharing?
Just pieces of it, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I guess it's really chapter driven in the sense that what substrates do you have to work with? What's already been identified on in soil databases or geology databases that you can pull out. Coyote Ridge is a perfect example, because the soil type there, Montero Rocky Loam, that's the one over there. And so that you can pull out for Coyote Ridge, where you get up into Mount Hamilton. Do you guys get up into Hamilton Range?
Yes.
Yeah, so then you get into Serpentine up there. There may even be some pockets of limestone or rhyolite or some other volcanic substrates that might be interesting also. So with USGS data and Natural Resource Conservation Service data, the soils information can go a long way into doing some of these analyses that we did when we're looking at abiotic things. Then when you're talking about rarity hotspots, CNDDB spatial information is great. And then local experts, Don and some of those other folks, they can tell you exactly where all the concentrations are.
We've talked about starting that effort of trying to gather the information, but what I'm looking for is, okay, even if we start gathering the information, instead of having to start our own effort to compile and cross-analyze all that, are there examples, say, from what you did there where you can say, well, this is how we did it?
Yeah.
Here's the tool we use.
Yeah, I guess it's not really so much. It's very simple modeling. It's really not very complicated at all. I mean, as a step-by-step process, you have a couple data sets, and you have some areas that you use to, clip them out, so to speak. So with like the development farmland mapping and monitoring program information, that can give you an analysis of what's been developed and what's been developed on and what has not. It's not very rigorous of an effort. we streamlined it as much as possible to make it quick and to tell the story without getting too technical. So I mean, if you wanted to set up something where you know, we have another meeting and I can come down and give you a couple of step-by-steps and tools, I'd be happy to do that.
Did you find that sort of defining the areas by watershed boundary, which, like you said, it sort of takes it out of the political realm, but it also puts you in some ways into the political realm, because now you're actually having to deal with multiple parties who all have interest in this sort of new space. Did you find that in some ways, while it was a benefit, was also a challenge?
Not so much. I mean, actually, one comment at a steering committee meeting with the Eastern Alameda Conservation Strategy folks, one of the Fish and Wildlife Service women who was there representing the Fish and Wildlife Service said that she was concerned about the way that we had gone and identified parcels because, of course, the service is always worried about backlash and litigation. And somebody else on the steering committee piped up and said, well, in this day and age, with Google Earth and all the information available from just aerial photos, you can do a lot of reconnaissance that way and basically get the same information. And so he was arguing that it's really just a moot point anymore because, you know, you've got TNC that's been identifying properties for a long time.
Right.
And they just have a little bit different take on it using, you know, small honeycomb-shaped cells, but it's all the same. And with the way things are going and the remote sensing you can do from any desktop computer, it's I think that argument's slowly going by the wayside.
I think we need to wrap up. We need to be out of here by 10.
Okay.
Thank you very much for
yeah, you're welcome.